Justice has got to be served. Justice has got to be done. But God isn't through with us. It's not the end of the story. God sends his Son, the eternal Son of God who dwells in inapproachable light, leaves his place in heaven on a rescue mission to seek and to save that which was lost. He enters into human history in the form and fullness of a human being, the man, Jesus of Nazareth. So the eternal God becomes a man. And he lives his life as the perfect human, the true representative of the human race. He lives his life representing you and me. He represents us, and that he never demands to have it his way. Instead, his prayer is, thy will be done, not my will be done. And he lives his life exemplifying what it means to live out the will of the Father. Not seeking his own will, not selfishly having everything revolve around him. As it says in Philippians, he didn't see his equality with God as something to be taken advantage of. Instead, he poured himself out, emptied himself, becoming a slave and suffering the humiliation of the cross. He lived his entire life in a perfect relationship with the Father, never demanding to have it his own way, but always saying, through his actions, his words, his deeds, thy will be done. Even when he was faced with the torment, the torture, the ignominy, and the shame of the cross, his prayer, sweating drops of blood, was, Lord, Father, if there's any other way, let's do that. But not my will, thy will. He lived a perfect human life. He lived his perfect human life. And he goes to the cross as the perfect human to pay the price for our sin. And so God the Father pours out judgment against sin upon the Son. Now you might think, how on earth is that just? Because the Son agreed to it. The Son of God agreed to it. It's not something that was inflicted upon him. He said, I will do it. And he didn't say, I will do it in the Garden of Gethsemane. He said, I'll do it before even creation came into existence. Before the foundation of the earth was laid, this plan was in place. God knew. Nothing takes him by surprise. And the Son willingly lays down his life. No one can take it from me, Jesus says, unless I lay it down, and I have the power to take it back up too. And so the Son who lives a perfect life reflecting the character and nature of God to each other, and to all of creation, goes to the cross and takes upon himself as the perfect human the justice and the penalty for sin upon himself. And so justice has been served at the cross. Justice against sin has been served at the cross. And any who put their faith in Christ, the finished work of Jesus, anyone who puts their faith in the finished work of Jesus Christ, is putting their faith in the fact that their guilt, their sin, and their shame has been paid for at the cross. I heard someone say recently that when God looks at us, he doesn't see our sin. He sees our sin nailed to the cross. And I understand what he meant by that. It doesn't go far enough. If you are in Christ, when the Father looks at the cross, he doesn't see his Son only. He sees you. In the Son, you are nailed to that cross if you're in Christ. The justice of God has been poured out against you if you are in Christ. You are crucified with Christ on that cross. You have been crucified with him. That's why your guilt has been paid for, because you have paid for it on the cross in Christ. You are nailed to that cross with him. Do you understand that? You are nailed to the cross with Christ. You have been crucified with him. Do a word search. Look it up. It's in there. You'll find it writ large across the New Testament and the writing of Paul. You are crucified with him. The Father sees the cross of Christ. He sees his Son, and he sees all those who are in Christ nailed to that cross with him. And so you are dead. Dead to sin. And justified because of the cross of Christ. This is the teaching of Paul in the book of Romans. A law can only be applied to someone who's alive, but you're dead. And so the law no longer applies, right? The husband is only married to the wife while he's alive. If she goes off and runs off with another guy while the husband's alive, she's committing adultery. But if the husband's dead, she's set free from the law of marriage, and she's free to go and remarry. You see, you are dead in Christ, nailed to the cross, crucified with him. And so the law no longer applies. And those who are dead in Christ will be raised with Christ. Crucified with him. Raised with him. Dead in Christ. On the cross. And alive in his resurrection by the power of the Spirit. So don't walk anymore in the ways of the flesh, but walk in light of the Spirit. That's the whole thing. That's the whole message of Romans right there. It's Romans 5, 6, and 7. That's what it is. That's what it's saying. In fact, Romans 8 says exactly the same thing. Justified. Declared not guilty because you've been nailed to the cross with Christ.